Let's drill into something that often gets glossed over: how the aging body handles fat-soluble vitamins, specifically vitamins A and E. After age 60, there's a measurable decline in the body's ability to metabolize and regulate these compounds. That's not a theory, it's a physiological reality grounded in liver function, enzymatic activity, and cellular storage dynamics. Fat-soluble vitamins don't behave like their water-soluble counterparts. They aren't simply excreted in the urine when there's too much. Instead, they are stored in the liver and adipose tissue. That means when you take in more than you need, especially in supplement form, it doesn't just pass through, it accumulates. And in an aging body, this accumulation becomes more problematic. Let's start with the liver. This is the primary organ responsible for processing and detoxifying what we ingest. As we age, liver blood flow decreases, mitochondrial efficiency within hepatocytes drops, and cytochrome P450 enzyme activity central to vitamin metabolism slows down. This means the body becomes less efficient at converting vitamin A to its active forms and clearing out the excess. It's like having a slower drain in your sink. Keep pouring in more than it can handle, and eventually it overflows. Except in this case, the overflow shows up as toxicity, affecting bones, skin, vision, and even neurological function. With vitamin A, this becomes a serious issue. Studies have shown that older adults who consume high levels of preformed vitamin A, not beta-carotene, but synthetic or animal-derived forms like retinol or retinol esters, have a higher risk of osteoporosis and hip fractures. The mechanism is well documented. Excess vitamin A ramps up osteoclast activity, breaking down bone at a rate that outpaces rebuilding. This isn't a nutrient doing what it's supposed to. This is a system pushed out of balance by over-supplementation. Now look at vitamin E. Again, fat-soluble and again handled primarily by the liver. Alpha tocopherol, the most common form in supplements, can linger in the body far longer than needed, especially in individuals with declining hepatic clearance. Beyond a certain threshold, vitamin E starts behaving less like a protective antioxidant and more like a pro-oxidant, especially when it displaces other isoforms like gamma tocopherol. That imbalance can shift redox dynamics in the wrong direction. And let's not ignore the well-documented data linking high-dose vitamin E supplementation in older adults to increased risk of hemorrhagic stroke. The blood thinning effect in combination with age vessel fragility becomes a perfect storm for intracranial bleeding. So what does this mean in real terms? It means that after 60, your biochemistry becomes less forgiving. The same vitamin that might have been neutral or even beneficial at 30 can become hazardous when systems slow down. The reduced ability to metabolize and excrete these compounds turns daily vitamin into a potential chronic exposure. And unlike deficiencies, which typically produce symptoms over time and can be corrected, toxicities are often silent until the damage is done. That's why precision matters. Aging doesn't just change what we need, it changes how our body handles what we give it. Let's take a deeper look at vitamin A, specifically what happens when there's too much of it in the system, especially after the age of 60. Most people associate vitamin A with healthy vision, immune function, and skin health, and that's accurate in the right amounts. But there's a crucial difference between physiological levels and pharmacological overload. And in older adults, that difference becomes significantly more consequential. Vitamin A is a fat-soluble vitamin, meaning it's stored in the liver and adipose tissue rather than excreted in the urine like water-soluble vitamins. Over time, especially with chronic supplementation, levels can rise far above what the body actually needs. In youth, the body is typically more resilient, it clears excess more efficiently, bones are denser, liver function is more robust. But after 60, those parameters begin to shift. Bone turnover accelerates, liver metabolism slows, and tissues become more sensitive to imbalances. It's within this context that excess vitamin A turns from helpful. The link between high vitamin A levels and reduced bone density isn't speculative. It's been replicated in epidemiological studies and clinical trials. Older adults who supplement with high levels of preformed vitamin A forms like retinol or retinol palmitate, which are common in multivitamins and fortified foods, are at greater risk for osteopenia, osteoporosis, and even hip fractures. This isn't just correlation, there's a direct mechanism. Vitamin A in excess increases the activity of osteoclasts, the cells responsible for breaking down bone tissue. Under normal conditions, this is part of a balance process. Osteoclasts break down old or damaged bone, while osteoblasts build new bone. But when vitamin A levels are too high, that balance shifts. Osteoclast activity outpaces osteoblast activity, leading to net bone loss. It's not a dramatic collapse, it's a slow erosion that's often unnoticed until a fracture occurs. One of the more concerning aspects of this process is how silent it is. People don't feel bone demineralization happening. There's no warning signal, no acute symptom, but over years, bone architecture weakens. A minor fall that once might have left a bruise now leads to a hip fracture, which in older adults dramatically increases the risk of loss of independence, hospitalization, and mortality. And to make matters more complex, many older adults are still encouraged to take multivitamins as a preventive measure, even though the data doesn't support blanket supplementation. If a senior is already eating liver, eggs, or fortified dairy, and then adds a multivitamin on top of that, they can easily surpass the upper tolerable intake level for vitamin A without realizing it. The idea here isn't to demonize vitamin A. It plays essential roles in the body, but context matters. After 60, we're not working with the same physiological machinery. Supplementation should not be based on generalized advice, but on precise needs backed by blood panels and functional assessments, because when it comes to bone health in older adults, more vitamin A is not just unnecessary, it's potentially harmful. Now let's turn our attention to vitamin E, commonly praised for its antioxidant properties and often taken with the belief that it will protect the heart, slow aging, or enhance immune function. But when you look beneath the surface, especially in older adults, the story becomes more complex. After the age of 60, high-dose vitamin E supplementation isn't just unnecessary, it can actually be dangerous, and not in vague or hypothetical terms, but in ways we can measure: increased risk of stroke and disruption of the body's finely tuned antioxidant systems. Vitamin E is fat soluble, which means it's stored in body tissues and not rapidly excreted. The most common supplemental form is alpha tocopherol. It's often dosed in hundreds of international units, doses that far exceed what most people get from food. And while it does act as an antioxidant, protecting cell membranes from oxidative damage, it's important to understand that antioxidants don't work in isolation. They're part of a tightly regulated network that includes enzymes like glutathione peroxidase, catalase, and other compounds like vitamin C and coenzyme Q10. When you flood that network with one dominant player, especially in high doses, you disrupt the balance. One of the best documented consequences of this imbalance is the suppression of other forms of vitamin E, like gamma tocopherol. Unlike alpha tocopherol, gamma tocopherol plays a distinct role in trapping reactive nitrogen species and protecting against inflammation. High doses of alpha tocopherol can competitively inhibit the absorption and function of gamma tocopherol. So in attempting to boost one part of the antioxidant defense system, you can end up weakening another. But it's not just theoretical. Clinical studies, including large-scale meta-analyses of randomized controlled trials, have found that high-dose vitamin E supplementation, particularly doses over 400 IU per day, is associated with an increased risk of hemorrhagic stroke in older adults. This type of stroke is caused by bleeding in the brain, not a blockage. And it makes sense mechanistically. Vitamin E has anticoagulant effects. It thins the blood. That might sound like a good thing for heart health, but in the aging brain, where blood vessels become more fragile and blood pressure regulation is often less stable, this can lead to catastrophic outcomes. It's also worth pointing out that vitamin E from food, nuts, seeds, and plant oils doesn't carry these risks. That's because whole foods provide vitamin E in complex forms, with complementary nutrients that the body recognizes and handles more efficiently. The issue is not with the nutrient itself, it's with the dosage and the delivery. At a certain point, especially after 60, the margin between helpful and harmful narrows. The assumption that more antioxidants automatically equal better health is overly simplistic. The body doesn't need more disruption. It needs regulation, precision, and balance. Taking high-dose vitamin E without a documented deficiency or a specific medical indication doesn't improve health span. If anything, it introduces a variable that may increase risk quietly over time until it's too late to reverse. Let's talk about vitamin B6 pyridoxine. It's often marketed as essential for brain health, mood regulation, and energy metabolism. And all of that is true, up to a point. But in older adults, particularly those over 60, excessive intake of B6 from supplements can have the opposite effect of what's intended. Rather than supporting the nervous system, high doses of B6 can damage it, leading to peripheral neuropathy, sensory disruption, and even impairments in gait and balance. To understand why this happens, we have to look at how vitamin B6 functions in the body. B6 is water-soluble, unlike vitamins A and E, and people often assume this means safe at any dose because the body will flush out the excess. That's not how it works. At high levels, especially sustained over weeks or months, B6 becomes neurotoxic. This is not a rare side effect. It's well documented in clinical literature. The nervous system is especially sensitive to nutrient imbalances, and B6 in excess appears to damage the dorsal root ganglia, clusters of nerve cells that relay sensory information from the body to the spinal cord and brain. In practical terms, this kind of toxicity can lead to tingling in the hands and feet, numbness, burning sensations, and a gradual loss of coordination. In seniors who are already at increased risk for falls and instability due to sarcopenia, joint degeneration, and changes in vision or proprioception, adding neurotoxicity to that list becomes a serious liability. We're not just talking about discomfort, we're talking about reduced mobility, increased fall risk, and potentially irreversible nerve damage. What makes this particularly problematic is that B6 is added to a lot of supplements, multivitamins, energy boosters, sleep aids, and even some meal replacement shakes can all contribute to daily B6 intake. The upper tolerable intake level, or UL, for vitamin B6 in adults is set at 100 ml per day. But cases of toxicity have been documented at doses as low as 50 ml per day, taken consistently over time. And many over-the-counter supplements exceed those levels, often without users being aware of it. The problem isn't B6 itself, it's the assumption that more is better. B6 is involved in synthesizing neurotransmitters like serotonin, dopamine, and GABA, all critical for mood and cognition. But these processes don't accelerate just because you flood the system with more substrate. The enzymes involved are rate limited. Once they're saturated, excess B6 doesn't enhance function. It accumulates in tissues and begins to interfere with nerve signaling. Older adults are particularly vulnerable because the efficiency of nutrient processing, detoxification, and nerve repair all decline with age. The buffer zone for safe intake narrows. What might be tolerable at 30 becomes risky at 65. The goal should always be to meet your physiological need. No more, no less. Supplementation needs to be evidence-based, not marketing-driven. Because once nerve damage sets in, recovery is slow, and in many cases it doesn't fully reverse. That's not a risk worth taking for a vitamin you may already be getting enough of from food. Let's now focus on something often overlooked in the conversation about supplementation, the diet itself. Specifically, whether seniors, those over the age of 60, are actually deficient in the vitamins they're being told to supplement. The data say no. Most seniors, particularly in developed countries, are not deficient in vitamins A, E, or B6. In fact, they're often getting more than enough of these nutrients through regular dietary intake. That's where the danger lies, because supplementation without deficiency doesn't just add redundancy, it adds risk. We're wired to think of supplements as harmless insurance. But the truth is, after 60, the way your body processes, stores, and clears these compounds changes significantly. And if you're already consuming an adequate amount through food, adding more in pill form is not neutral. It creates a biochemical excess. That excess doesn't just sit there, it interacts with your cells, your liver, your nervous system. It shifts things. And in many cases, it shifts them in the wrong direction. Take vitamin A, for example. A single serving of liver can exceed the daily recommended intake by over 1,000%. Add in fortified cereals, dairy, and eggs, and many older adults are already meeting or surpassing their needs. Now tack on a multivitamin that contains preformed vitamin A, and you've just crossed into toxic territory, gradually but consistently. That's the risk most people miss. Chronic overexposure through small daily doses. And because fat-soluble vitamins like A and E accumulate over time, the negative effects, like bone demineralization or increased stroke risk, don't show up immediately. They compound silently. With vitamin E, it's the same story. Nuts, seeds, leafy greens, and plant oils are all rich sources of natural vitamin E. Most people eating a balanced diet are already covering their bases, but when they take an isolated alpha tocopherol supplement, just in case, they're not enhancing their antioxidant system, they're potentially unbalancing it. That imbalance, as we've discussed, can lead to decreased gamma tocopherol levels, impaired redox signaling, and increased hemorrhagic stroke risk in seniors. Now consider vitamin B6, found abundantly in foods like poultry, potatoes, bananas, and fortified grains. Most older adults are nowhere near deficient. Yet many supplements still contain 10, 20, even 50 times the recommended daily allowance. And in this age group, that's a recipe for neurotoxicity, not benefit. Because the nervous system becomes more sensitive with age, and what was once a safe intake range narrows considerably. So what's the takeaway? It's this. The assumption that aging automatically equals deficiency is flawed. Before adding any supplement, the smarter path is measurement, blood panels, dietary analysis, actual data, because the risk isn't just wasting money. The risk is overriding the body's natural regulatory systems with synthetic inputs it doesn't need and can't handle as efficiently as it once did. There's a reason the body evolved to derive nutrients from food. They come in balanced ratios, bound with cofactors, buffered by fiber and enzymes. Supplements isolate and concentrate, sometimes with good reason. But after 60, if the foundation is already in place through diet, you're not filling a gap. You're overloading the circuit. Let's talk about precision, because when it comes to supplementation, especially in seniors, the conversation needs to shift from general advice to data-driven action. The idea that we should supplement just in case or because everyone over 60 needs more of this or that is not only outdated, it's potentially harmful. Supplements should be guided by one thing: objective measurement. Specifically, blood tests, not assumptions, not trends, not what the label on a bottle or a celebrity wellness brand says. Here's the reality. Your biology is not generic. It's not average. It's specific to you. Your diet, your metabolism, your medications, your genetics, your lifestyle. And once you reach 60, the variability between individuals increases, not decreases. Two people the same age might have completely different absorption rates, different clearance rates, and different needs for the exact same vitamin. That's not something you can guess your way through. Blood tests give you direct insight into how your system is functioning in real time. They tell you where your serum levels of vitamins like B6, retinol, or alpha tocopherol actually are. They tell you whether you're deficient, sufficient, or approaching toxicity. Without that data, supplementation becomes guesswork, and guesswork, especially at this stage of life, is not benign. Let's be clear, many seniors are not deficient in the vitamins they're told to supplement. In fact, many are already at or above the upper safe limits, especially for fat-soluble vitamins like A and E or nerve-sensitive ones like B6. And the damage from chronic excess doesn't happen overnight. It builds slowly at the cellular level, altering gene expression, disrupting neural signaling, changing bone remodeling dynamics. By the time symptoms emerge, neuropathy, imbalance, fractures, cognitive changes, the process has already been underway for years. So why are so many people still taking supplements without testing? A lot of it comes from a cultural narrative, this idea that more is better, that if a vitamin is good in small amounts, it must be better in large ones. But the biochemistry doesn't support that. Vitamins are cofactors. They work at precise levels in tightly controlled systems. Push those levels too high, and you don't accelerate function, you distort it. This is where functional blood testing becomes not just helpful, but essential. It brings clarity. You may think you're low on vitamin E because of dry skin or fatigue, but a blood test might reveal your levels are already elevated. You might assume you need more B6 for mood or cognition, only to find your plasma concentration is bordering on neurotoxic. These are not things you can feel accurately. They're things you need to measure. The tools exist. Serum micronutrient panels, methylation markers, functional liver panels, they're accessible. They're not theoretical. They take the guesswork out of supplementation and allow for real precision. And in the context of aging, where homeostatic balance becomes harder to maintain, that precision isn't a luxury, it's a requirement. Supplements are powerful tools, but like any tool, their value comes from how well they're targeted, and targeting starts with data. When we talk about health optimization, especially in individuals over 60, we're not talking about flooding the system with more of everything. The goal is biological precision, not biological overload. The body is not a passive container you just top off with more nutrients. It's a dynamic, self-regulating system. And when that system starts to age, what it needs most isn't noise, it's clarity, it's balance. And that means being strategic with what we put in, not operating on autopilot with handfuls of supplements every morning. The nervous system, the endocrine system, even the mitochondrial machinery inside our cells, they all operate on thresholds, signals, and feedback loops. You push one system too hard, too much vitamin A, too much B6, too much E, and you're not optimizing anything. You're introducing instability because these nutrients don't act in isolation. They compete for transport, for enzyme binding, for receptor access. Elevating one can suppress another. Enhancing one pathway can downregulate another. This isn't theoretical. it's measurable. Think of your biology like a symphony. Every input, light, sleep, movement, nutrients, is an instrument. Too much of one and the whole thing goes out of tune. When someone over 60 starts taking supplements without precision, without data to guide dosage and timing, they're essentially handing a megaphone to one section of the orchestra and telling the rest to play louder to compensate. That's not harmony, that's chaos. And what's ironic is that the intention is usually good. People want to improve energy, cognition, resilience. They're trying to be proactive, but proactivity without precision is still reaction. It's throwing inputs at the system and hoping something sticks. That's not how complex systems work. That's not how aging physiology works. You don't support a complex system by drowning it in uncoordinated variables. You support it by tuning into its signals, its actual needs, and responding in kind. Let's get specific. In aging, there's a natural decline in detoxification efficiency, mitochondrial turnover, and neuroplasticity. That means the body has less margin for error. It becomes more sensitive to excess, more prone to imbalance. A young person might tolerate 300% of their RDA, vitamin B6, for a while. An older adult, that could mean nerve damage. And that's the key point. Aging narrows the therapeutic window. What used to be harmless now carries weight. Precision is not about restriction. It's about alignment. It's about asking, what does this body at this stage of life with this diet and this metabolic profile actually need? And then responding accordingly. Sometimes that means adding, sometimes that means subtracting, but it always means measuring, observing, calibrating. Supporting biology as it ages is not about amplifying everything. It's about understanding the system deeply enough to intervene minimally and effectively. That's the future of health span optimization. Less noise, more signal, and ultimately interventions that respect how exquisitely sensitive and how incredibly adaptive the body truly is. So here's where it all comes together. The narrative that more vitamins mean better health, especially after age 60, is not only outdated, it's biologically inaccurate. Your body, particularly in later decades of life, is not asking for more inputs, it's asking for smarter ones. Precision matters. Balance matters. The vitamins we've discussed, A, E, B6, aren't inherently harmful, but in excess and without measured need, they become stressors instead of supports. This isn't about fear, it's about responsibility. It's about aligning what you take with what your body actually needs based on data, not assumptions or trends. The tools to make those decisions intelligently, blood tests, dietary assessments, clinical markers, are available. And using them is not overcomplicating health. It's honoring it. It's choosing clarity over confusion, precision over volume, and resilience over risk. Because optimal aging doesn't come from overwhelming the system, it comes from listening to it, supporting it, and intervening only where necessary, with accuracy and with care.